Amazing. Hello at home, wherever you are in the world. My name is Rose Ingrid Benjamin. I'm one of the curators of the National Arts Center Hip Hop Theater Festival. Welcome to day 4. It's been a solid week. We're so excited about today and particularly about this event, Dangerous Minds, in conversation with the hip hop educators. Shout out the educators, they're right there behind us.
Woo! Triple H.
As we were curating this festival, Nina Leakino and I, she's our artistic director of English theater, really thought about big knowledge as well as art form. And so when I was like, what kind of panel would I want to have? I immediately thought of my friends and the educators and connecting hip hop and education. So I'm excited about this. We just want to firstly say hello, also honor those who defend this land. We are on the unceded and unsurrendered Anishinaabe and Algonquin territories right here. And so we recognize that and we honor that. But when I thought about education, I immediately also thought about our friends at Arts Alive and Marie-Ève.
Yeah, hi everybody. So excited to be here today. My name is Marie-Ève Charbonneau. I work for Arts Alive. We're the education department here at the NAC. So I am joining you today as a former high school educator, now working in art administration. And I'm here just as excited as you are, as a student, as a learner. So as somebody who's very curious, and I invite you to come in with your curiosity today. That's the theme. Without further ado, I do want to introduce you to your amazing host. Local educator, child of this community, radio host of Black on Black, Adrienne Codet. So let's get started.
Well, hello to all of you. I can't see anything really.
There's some beautiful.
Look at
people
all
out
of
here.
your wonderful faces. And thank you for coming and being part of this conversation. Dangerous Minds, it sounds ominous. But that actually might be true in a lot of ways, that we as disruptive educators are here to have that conversation. And it's my pleasure to be here on the third day of African History Month, African Legacy Month, Black Legacy Month, Black History Month, whatever it is, and be amongst the community celebrating while we have this important conversation near and dear to my heart, and that I get to have it with these wonderful individuals who I've just gotten an opportunity to meet, and they're going to be in conversation with us. Now, you're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions, and for those of you online joining us, you can put your questions in the chat, and they'll be communicated to us. And we want to give quite a bit of time, or enough time, for those questions. So as you generate them, please, we will have questions. That's what the Q stands for. And then we will provide some answers. If you need to lead up to that, then do that in your head. That's like doing the math in your head. And then just come to the mic, ask the question. And so, are you ready to come on this journey with us and get started? That's right. Get into the hip hop of it. Call and response is an important element. I'd like my panelists to introduce themselves by taking an opportunity to take a swing at this first question that is a selfish question. It's the one I had after our online meeting when I said, wow, this is amazing. So to introduce yourselves, how has hip hop culture allowed you to be the teacher you needed when you were a student? Or the bonus round.
That was deep.
I can give you that question to start. Let that marinate first. We'll give the bonus round question after.
They got.
Yo, my mic's on. All right, I guess I got this one. I feel like I had the teachers I needed growing up, so not a fair question in that regard. They weren't hip hop, but I distinctly remember in grade 10, I did a law course, and we were allowed to present however we wanted to, and I made a rap music video in a law class in grade 10. So the fact that that teacher was able to do that for me was awesome. I also had another teacher, same year, English, and he knew I was a sci-fi head, and we were studying Macbeth. and he put 3 VHS tapes of the Star Wars trilogy, the original, and said, Star Wars is based on Macbeth, and he walked away. Everybody else was picking their topics, and I'm like mind blown, going, what is he talking about? And I watched all the movies in that light, and that was incredible. Like, he was so right. Like, everything, even the Ewoks is in Macbeth, which is so weird. Yeah, well, you know how they were disguising themselves and they were heading towards the castle, like they had leaves on their head, like the Ewoks in the forest?
Fourth?
Yeah, the Ewoks. So, yeah, so I was fortunate enough to have good teachers all along, and I feel incredibly blessed to be able to giving that back and hopefully being that good of a teacher for my students.
And you did it. And now please tell us who you are as one of the hip-hop educators.
I go by the name of Chase March. I am a DJ, producer, MC, teacher, librarian, stay-at-home dad currently, and having lots of fun doing all of those things.
Yeah. Stuff.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone next? Got the microphones straight?
Check. Greetings. Thanks all for coming, physical and virtual. My name is Michael Gransu. As an artist, I'm Mike All. And I'll share a couple of lines from a song called Hip Hop Hustle that I think speak to that question that Adrian asked. Include me too, but I don't have the moves. Instead of dancing up breaks, Spuds chanting dub plates. First I studied the tapes, taught me listening skills. Candidate for ADD, peep who's sitting still. Hyperactive taught, doc says pop Ritalin. No need, remedy, be hip-hop rhythm. Once I got spit in, made a man out of me. Mike's blood type, HIP-HOP.
Hey, that's it. That's it.
And I'll try to unpack that briefly. So I'm a hyperactive person, much more when I was younger. Shout out to my moms for dealing with that. And you know, some people do, of course, need medicine. No knocking that. But I do think sometimes doctors try to overprescribe. There is business in medicine. So doctors offer that as an option, but my mom and dad, they didn't want that. And really, hip-hop helped me with that. Wanting to understand everything the artist was saying really made me focus and listen and try to memorize, understand every word, every cadence, every syllable, every breath, every break. So that really caused me to focus, pause, and listen. And of course, as an educator, you need that. You need to listen to what your students are saying, both with their mouths and what they're not saying in their silences. And on the flip side, as I said, once I got spit in, made a man out of me. Hip-hop helped me to listen, but also gave me an opportunity to share my voice and tell my story. And I think that's what a lot of everybody, especially children, are looking for, a place to find themselves and express themselves. And hip-hop is based on a meritocracy. We have ciphers with a circle, no beginning or end. And as long as you have skill, as long as you're open to try, and as long as you have some effort and you're open to respect other people, anybody can get in a cipher and throw down. And we kind of try to establish that in our classroom. So I think the listening, the confidence to speak, and creating hopefully a safer space for people to share is how hip-hop helped me to be the student that I needed to be and or the teacher that I hope to be, if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for the TED Talk. That was amazing. Right? That was amazing. That was way more than I thought was going to happen. Thank you. Wow. How about next?
I was waiting for the bonus question. That would hit me.
You want the
deep.
bonus
That
question?
would hit me deep.
So the
Do it,
bonus
do it.
question was, how has hip-hop culture allowed for you to be the student of your profession?
Yes. So that one hit me deep. My name is Helen. I go by the Apologette artistically. I came to hip hop through spoken word. I'm a spoken word poet. I'm also a commercial actor, and I've been a high school English and drama teacher for 15 years. And now I serve as a resource teacher, actually at the Peel District School Board, in the capacity of working with safe and caring schools, community building, unity, safety, all of that. So for me, I always wanted to look for the in with my students that would be relevant and responsive to them before culturally responsive relevant pedagogy was a thing, before it was a trend. And what I realized was that not only is hip hop culture youth culture, but it should be educational culture as well. It should be the culture of education, because hip hop is about genius. It's about ingenuity. It's about resourcefulness. It's about creating something out of nothing. Creativity, communication, community building, all of these things are embedded within hip-hop culture. And that is what we need to re-envision and reimagine education. So the more I immersed myself in hip-hop culture, into spoken word, I've always been, a huge fan of the arts. I've always been immersed in the arts. But the more I allowed myself to endeavor into hip-hop culture, the more I realized this is the kind of community of education that I want to foster and create. And so I started bringing a lot of that into the classroom with me. I was fortunate enough that I had an amazing, amazing teacher who was by no definition hip-hop in the traditional sense, but she was hip-hop in her practice, in that her whole classroom was all about us. And she created and fostered an environment, a community that celebrated the strengths of her students. And that's what I brought into my classroom. And I learned very, very quickly that when we give students an opportunity to express themselves, when we give them voice, when we give them ownership over their classroom, when we allow them to, like, for example, in the English classroom, rather than having my students write essays about whatever it is that we've been doing for the last 40, 50 years, I had the most effective, creative, critical thought when I told my students, pick any song you want, put it into a format, here's your structure for your essay, and then you're gonna do an Instagram page for it. And when my kids came back with Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly and analyzed the lyrics, the richness and the depth of thought, and I was like, this is it. This is it. Hip-hop is the solution to the problems we are having in education, and I was sold. So for me, that's where it's at.
And as a lover of action research, an opportunity for educators to respond to the people right in front of them with the idea that they believe is the response. It's a laboratory of opportunity for us to co-learn together about something that will engage our students. So lots of amazing gems and nuggets there. So here we go, John.
I'm about to cry. Dang. Hip hop is the solution. Dang. I hear that because we've been facing some problems. My name is John Corbin. I've been an educator for 17 years. My first year of teaching, my first hip-hop album came out, first as the name The Runaway, and now as John Corbin, very inventive, but necessary. 17 years, 17 musical projects, which has been a blast, including working with these folks, with the educators in the profession. Fought for culturally responsive pedagogy, diversity in English literature, English social science, special ed guidance, and every time I feel like Wyclef, every time I keep trying to get out of English, they keep pulling me back in.
True story.
So I'm teaching English right now, and and then as an artist, poet, DJ, producer, writer, podcaster, I like making stuff. As a student, I needed teachers to see me, and that didn't happen. I also needed teachers to let me be me, which is, I think, as a kid, we probably use the word weird, but I think weird is just not knowing how to react to difference. That I just think different, I spoke different, I analyzed different, and I took that with me to university and studying sociology and then English, and then I wound up writing these interdisciplinary papers where I was quoting English literature and sociology texts, and the professor's like, we've never really seen that before. I needed space, and so hip hop allows me to carry that spirit and energy. I remember when my first year teaching, I'm teaching in kind of a mucky-muck neighborhood, and I don't have money, but you got to wear some clothes, right? I would remember wearing hip-hop shirts and then putting my dress shirt over top of it, just as part of an ethic that I'm going to carry with me into the class. And so being willing to be more of myself in the classroom, that I got that from hip hop, and that gave space to the students, the permission for them to shine their light. So that's how hip hop's done it for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, non-binary, our panel. So we had some preliminary conversations, and I think, isn't this an amazing possibility in cross-section of Canada right here, where we've seen that there are elements of something that gave you the spark to create, something that built you up in your character, that allowed you to feel free in your expression, something that opened your eyes, that allowed you to see a possibility beyond what others may have seen. And then there's something that just held you even when somebody didn't notice or see what you were building. And we get to this journey that we're now on, where you've had albums, you've had music out there, you've done that part, and you've found opportunity and success in the classroom where you've been able to bridge these things. We talk about hip-hop doing this or inspiring this, like hip-hop is something that, you know, I went to Costco and I grabbed some off the shelf and I drank it, and now I'm like, ready. But we do kind of need to tease that out a bit, because, you know, when we say hip hop, what are we actually talking about? Beyond what people may see clearly, but for you all, what are you distinguishing when we talk about hip hop educators?
Mike, I think you can nail it.
Her infinite power helping oppressed people, HIPHOP. Wholly integrated people having omnipresent power, HIPHOP, to quote KRS-One. So firstly, hip-hop is a culture of many elements. What often happens is one element of it, rap, is often assumed to be the whole package. Rap is just one part of it. Rap is the act of speaking rhythmically over music or without, and sharing poetry, rhythm and poetry. You could also talk about rap as a recorded artificial product, but that's another story. Shout out to Tiggs. Hip-hop is a culture of people. Working class people started off, you know, in the Bronx, 1970s, with elements from Africa, indigenous culture, Asian, Europe, all over the world, mix it up in a melting pot. Basically, it was a way for the youth to express themselves, a safe way for them to express their bravado as men battling, young men, young women too, in a non-violent way. So there were gangs going on at the time. Shout out to us, as such, the Black Spades, fighting with each other, rumbling in the Bronx. People were dying. So some community elders said, instead of battling with knives and guns, let's battle with these hip-hop elements. See who has better breakdance moves. See who can rap better. And these were supposed to be alternatives to gangs. And then you had gangs like the Black Spades becoming hip-hop crews, Zulu Nation, and still battling, still representing where they're from, but in a non-lethal way. And there's lots of elements, even though rap gets all the attention. Shout out to DJs. That's the most important element, the foundation. Yeah, make some more noise for the DJ. Let's go. You know, you have breakdancers, graffiti artists, MCs. Those are the core four, if you want to call it the square. And you can add on beatboxing, street entrepreneurism, business, street knowledge, street fashion, wisdom, slang, all of these things. But basically, it's a culture of many elements, not just rap. And I'll start it with a KRS quote. I'll end with a KRS-One quote. Rap is something you do. Hip-hop is something you live. Rap is something you do. Hip-hop is something you live.
And I love that, because I used to say that often to students and in PD about how I distinguish teacher and educator. Like I hold, you know, teacher is to educator what rap is to hip hop. And it is this thing that, like, I didn't know I was doing anything other than just being present to myself and the world and the culture that had, you know, just given me something. And I'm bringing that into a room. But it's different when you decide to go on a journey where you're like, I'm intentional about this. So how did you get to that moment where you were like, you know what, this is what we're going to do? It's just bottom line. How did it happen?
Like, for me, it was, okay, so I was going to say energy, which is like my shortcut for community. Points where I've really enjoyed making music is when there's people around me. So that's what I was going to say, but it comes in combination with this. When I was in Teachers College, which was 2007, I'm working on the record, and I would say that of all the associate teachers, the classrooms that I went into, this was like my worst one. Like, we just didn't get along. She had different expectations for me. Like, it just didn't work. But she was the one that said, you know, she knew a little bit about me working on this record, and she's like, what if you taught these students to rap, and then they rapped about the story that we're studying in the 2007? And I was like, all all right, let's give it a shot. So, you know, if there's teachers out here, you remember how useless those lesson plans you had to write were, like 2 or 3 pages, right? Like now you just scribble a few lines and you're good, right? So I gotta like map out 4 days of like teaching them to write, but it was the product that stunned everyone. It stunned the AT, myself, the students, and the one that was doing it. It was a wonderful moment where there's just like beat running in the class, and these students step up to the metaphorical mic and they just throw down four bars, and yeah, it was space, right? Using what I've got, and that was such a marvelous lesson in my teaching training, where I could say, you know, when I got my first job, I got a media studies program, and I'm like, we do documentaries here. This is what we focus on. I'm like, oh yeah, have you guys used Scratch about No, we don't know what that is. Have you used Just for Kicks about shoe culture? No, we don't know what that is. Chappelle just dropped like this massive and Michel Gondry directed documentary. Have you? No, we don't know what. Okay. This is what we're gonna do, right? And open. Now we're opening the students' world, and I found you had to open the teachers' world as well. So where there is energy and space, then there is an opportunity to experiment, and the results have always been amazing. Yeah, that's for me. Anybody
Discoveries.
else?
And yes, please. We need another round for that question. The moment when you were like, this is it for me. This is the thing that's going to drive my opportunity to be that better teacher and better person in that classroom.
I think for me, it was the moment that I introduced spoken word into the classroom. And my kids went from literally being practical zombies in the room to coming to life. And I saw their souls and their spirits pouring out through their lips. And that's when I knew. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. I don't really ascribe to whatever they're telling me to do anymore. I don't care, because this is it and this is how it works. And that's where I'm going with it. So for me, I think that was a pretty pivotal moment, and recognizing that there is so much power in the spoken word. There's so much power in poetry, in rhythm and poetry, and in giving students an opportunity to really express their soul. And like John said, making space for that. Because I always tell my kids, especially in the drama class, like, we need to stop separating our head from the rest of our body. We are so cerebral. And that, you know, just like divides us off as human beings when we want to approach things holistically as educators. And it's so funny now that we see so much more of a push towards that again. And a lot of us who've been doing the arts, who've been doing hip-hop, who've been doing poetry, who've been doing drama, all these things, we're kind of looking at them and laughing and being like, we've been doing that, you know? Like, this is nothing new. And so, yeah, just seeing that moment come to life really reaffirmed for me that being a little bit of a rebel in my classroom is a good thing that's serving the students,
Because you have to fight for that, right? We could talk all day about any of our school experiences. We don't remember what we got in grade 10 history. We remember the stories, right? So that's what your students are that's what they're gonna carry with them. There's gonna be somebody on this stage in 20 years talking about, I got to do spoken word in Ms. Mia's class. Like, that's what it is, right? So that's what we have to fight for it. And it just sucks that we have to fight for it. Yeah.
It does seem to be also at the same time this interesting time that we're living in. And I'm listening to the story that you told about how maybe that question came at you in a particular way, but it allowed for you to see something. And I mean, I would think a mix of all of that would be why you mix. So what was it about DJing as an element that had you kind of be drawn to that particular element of hip-hop after you were given that kind of space along your journey, DJ Chase?
Thanks. I started out as an MC, and I really wanted to be like, me and my brother rapped, we messed around with it, right? And I wanted to be like Run DMC, so it was got to be me and my brother and a DJ. So we got a DJ in the group, and we kind of went our separate ways. We dropped 2 albums. We made a little bit of noise in the 90s, but we went our separate ways. He ended up doing college radio, and he kind of roped me in to do an interview on college radio because I used to do an interview show on cable television back in the day. So I had experience doing that, and it was a music show that I did. It was Community Cable 14 in Stony Creek, so Hamilton, Ontario area. And so I went in and I did the radio show interview, and it was awesome, and I loved it. I started my own show several years later, and just 2 weeks ago, I celebrated the 600th episode of that show.
Wow.
What's the name of the
Word
show?
is bond.
Congratulations.
Show is called
That's
Word is
amazing.
Bond, rap
is
radio.
Bond.
It's on 94.9 FM Radio Western, broadcast out of Western University. And so I got into DJing basically because I was a radio host. And then I loved it because I taught myself how to mix. I was doing a little bit of that beforehand, a little bit of scratching. And then I started doing friends' weddings, and then I started doing friends and friends' weddings. So I do weddings, I do rap shows, I do my radio show weekly. I love DJing, just being able to share the music that I love, being able to mix it together and present it in a nice format, and keep a party moving without any spots where it goes quiet. It's just like one continuous flow. And there's creativity in that. And I'm a creative person too. Like, I have to create. So I love that every time I DJ a wedding, it's never the same. Like, I never play the same songs. I mean, I'll play the same song.
Yeah, you will.
But I literally never play the same song followed by the same song followed by the same song. I don't do that, you know. So it's always, to me, kind of like Lego. I'm putting pieces together in different combinations, and it's incredible.
Thank you for that. Now, when we move from that element and we go, to the masters of the mic now, and we say, all right, you all are partners in curating an experience. When we say, okay, we might be at a party, or we might be out in the park. I remember back in the day here in Ottawa, right there, Confederation Park, in the 80s, that's where all of the black youth gathered on a Sunday, every Sunday noon to 4 o'clock. We had a blocko for the summer every day, and that's where you could find all of us. And so that was a curated experience, and it is about what will we remember. We won't remember who started the War of 1812, but we will remember the experience in that room. And as you curate through music, how are you using that curation kind of understanding to curate an experience for your students in a classroom?
I think it's about giving them an opportunity to tap into and realize all the greatness inside of them that they never really even knew that they had. It's giving them that mic and that opportunity. Actually, shout out to Hidden Figures, that movie, right? You know, there was the flashback at the beginning. The teacher gave the chalk to the young lady so that she could write on the board. And then fast forward to the future, Kevin Costner's character gave her the chalk or whatever, and she was able to write and show the equation. So I think of a couple experiences where we were celebrating in January/February, learning about Viola Desmond. And if you don't know about Viola Desmond, please do Google her and learn. Before Rosa Parks, she was a lady in Canada, Nova Scotia, who challenged segregation in 1946. So when I learned about her in university, I wrote my own poem, O Viola. And then as soon as I started getting into the classroom, after modeling that and having students answer some questions to learn about it, it was their turn. You write your own remix, a student remix, O Viola. And everybody presents it in the class, and then we voted who from our class would present it on the PA over the announcements in the morning, then present it at the assemblies, and then we were lucky to even go to other schools. This was grade 6. We went to high school, St. Mother Teresa, and this youth in grade 6 performed it in front of them, and they really loved it. They clapped, cheered, and that really boosted his confidence. And I'm happy to say that he's continued music. He's actually got commercial play on Flow, and speaking with him through Instagram, he said he can kind of trace some of that to that experience of sharing the O Viola student remix. So I think just giving them that mic, giving them an opportunity to share and tap into the potential they have in them, can help them set themselves up for the future success.
Yeah, that's dope. I'd like to add to that because
Please.
I really like the way you talk about curation. Like, I started as a college radio DJ too. I learned to keep the beats going so that the MCs could cipher. That was kind of, so that's like and then all of a sudden I freestyled and realized that I could say a thing or two. So that's always been valuable to me, and some of the stories I have in my educational journey are about points of music, right? So I don't know who to blame for this one, but I did not hear this song until second year university. I'm gonna sing the first line, see if you get it. Oh, pirates, yes, they rob I.
Stole I from the merchant ship.
We're gonna have a sing-along right now. Redemption song. I didn't hear that till second year university. I was my first black teacher. And that is such a meaningful, like, I walked out of that classroom, I'm like, can say consciously, like, my life's changed. Something has changed. So I think of curation in the classroom. I am trying to read the culture and find ways to add hip hop into it that will speak to the culture. So when I started teaching Macbeth, in grade 11, I said, what are some ways to read Shakespeare? Because at that time, we did it all 4 years. That doesn't really exist anymore. I didn't really get it until third year university. So I'm trying to figure out how to translate it. And I think the experience of listening, reading, and watching reminds me of hip hop for all the folks in my community that were like, I don't understand the words. I don't understand the words of these songs that you're listening to. Okay, well, let me just play a song, a hip hop song, audio only, and get the students to repeat back what they've got. All right, we've got some of the meaning. Now we're going to listen to it again. Here are the words. We're going to read along. All right, I get more of it, but I don't understand these references. All right, now we're going to watch the video and see how that representation of the choices made adds to your knowledge 3 times, and they're closer to an understanding. I could use any song, right? I used Keep Shining by Shad, which is such a massive song for the proper treatment of women and expanding your mind. But at that time, club rap was so insidious that we have all this, can I swear on here? No, all this garbage that you could see impacting your students, and they wouldn't have been exposed to that song. I could have chosen any song, right? So I'm curating these pieces as accent to the system, just trying to add that flavor, that spice. So that's part of I'm looking for any of those connections.
Can I be in this class, please? My goodness, can I go to this school, please?
Oh, just talking about curation and song selection is so important. And sometimes the songs we're selecting as text for site passage analysts, in many cases, it's like the antidote to the venom that is circulating and pumping through the system. Radio programming, they call it programming for a reason. Mm-hmm. So we got to be careful as educators and try to select a text that could be that little drop of antidote.
Wow. In fact, therefore, curating. You're intentional about what you're doing and using. Please, go ahead.
That's one of my favorite things to do with students is analyzing hip-hop lyrics from the lens of poetry and true hip-hop. So I'll pick local artists that literally my kids can message on Instagram. So for example, 3Card, Ja Coda, Mugabe Bianchia, all of these artists that my kids can actually connect with and speak to and unpack the lyrics with them if they wanted to. And they recognize as they go through it, not only does this sound really dope, they're like, Miss, this beat is nice, and they really like it, but then they're also looking at simile, metaphor, allusions, allegory. They're unpacking all kinds of, stylistic devices in poetry. They're taking apart layers upon layers upon layers of meaning. And I'm getting excited now because this is exactly what I do in the classroom. Every time I talk about it, my kids are like, Miss, you really love poetry. I'm like, I really love poetry.
You are absolutely geeking out right now.
And there's 2 lines in some songs that we will unpack for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Literally 20 minutes. And we will sit there and we'll go through and we'll think and we'll discuss and we'll debate. And the classroom just comes alive. So yes, curating and John said, countering some of the poison that has become the mainstream impression of what hip hop is nowadays. And that is, fueling a lot of behaviors and things in our students that we don't want to see, and having them understand and recognize that no, that was never the purpose. This is the purpose, right? Cultivating your genius is the purpose. And here's an example of how we can do that. And then they go crazy when they message Ja Coda and he messages them back. Yeah. And he's just like, yeah, actually, I was referring to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, section 3A, whatever. I don't know, I'm making that up. I have no idea. He's an encyclopedia. And then, and then they deepen their understanding and they recognize that, there is so much. I could talk forever. I'm going to stop there. But.
And this is where it becomes an anti-racism movement, right? For a couple of reasons. One, because you can provide true school hip hop when folks are being fed and programmed this idea of who men are, who black men are, what black culture is, right? And it's just so reductionist. And racist, right, for the sake of economy, that you can start to speak against that. And then the second thing is, your students, I would say, would be like, if they're critical thinkers, why haven't I heard of these guys before, right?
That's
Question.
exactly
That is
what they say.
Exactly what happened.
And now we can start interrogating industry
Yep.
and Canadian history from the point of Canadian musical industry history and the ways that things have been shut out. And for us, there are all kinds of influences, and it has been hard work to find Canadian ones, right? And there were these windows, and then they're gone, and we never ask why. And so there are the beauty of independent artists that are just out here bringing this art that can impact students right now. If we would learn who they are. So I applaud you doing that. It's important.
And so you've taken us through a couple of elements that I think are really important. I've been watching Black Lives Untold Stories, and I think it's episode 3, talks about Canadian hip hop and the importance of community radio to hip hop and local. We do the local. We give that vehicle to the local artists. We're right there to touch them. And then there's something else that you were saying about what we expose students to, and then it connected me to a memory of having a chance to have interviewed Colin Channer when he wrote his first book, Satisfy My Soul. A title he takes from a Bob Marley song. Happy birthday to Bob Marley, February 6th.
Yes.
And we interview him. And then Aita Sadu invites us to Toronto when he comes out with his second book. And I didn't actually even enjoy the second book, but I bought 6 copies and I put it in my school library. And here I have several. I see it walking down the hallway, making the girlfriend circle. So student in my class, I said, you're reading that book, tell me about it. And she's like, miss, and she uses an inappropriate word, but she's like, because that's how excited she is. She said, this is the best book I've ever read in my life. And I said, well, what would you do if I told you I know the author? Let's email him and ask, and you tell him what you think.
Yeah.
And she emails him, and in an hour, he emails back. And he goes, so when are you bringing me to Ottawa? And I shared this with Rose Ingrid last night, 4th Stage. That's where we brought him. And we started our first literary series because of Romy, a student in our class, who, if I saw Colin Channer today, that's like 20 years ago, he will ask me how Romy is. Like, that's how powerful that young person demonstrated. And so just my own ideas as you all were sharing. But I do have a question about, we're coming on to 4 years for what we will claim is an unprecedented disruption to the way school is. And there were some of us who, as we seem to recognize right now, long before 2020, had already been positioned to now do what professionally we're required to do, to be anti-racist in our practice, to be culturally relevant and relatable and in our pedagogical practice, to be anti-oppression in our practice. And in fact, maybe also positioned in our role as action educators or action research educators, abolitionist educators, to fully reimagine school as something like in the ashes of what is falling down right now. And so in this opportunity, probably like our last response before we take some questions, now that you're 4 years in, how are you reimagining the possibilities that were long ago planted and now have some will and push that center probably and highlight you in your school districts as those educators who are pioneers of where we need to be moving from 2024 forward? How are you reimagining education's possibilities?
I'm gonna cry.
John and I are like, hold back the tears. Hold them back.
Somebody else. What you
Chase,
got?
Mike, you guys want to kick this one off?
I think since you're so emotional, you're reacting emotionally to that, I think y'all should speak on it. Sounds like you're coming from a place of real.
Okay, I'll start and
connection.
then John will jump in. Both of us are very emotional at this question because we have been through the ringer over the past 4, 5 so years, and like 1 foot out the door of education. I think a lot of educators can empathize with that for different reasons. One of the reasons for me is it's very, very difficult and challenging when you want to do these kinds of, I say cutting edge for lack of a better term, but it's not really cutting edge, it's just good pedagogy. When you want to do these things and you receive so much pushback, and it's exhausting. It's so draining.
Yeah.
I, as I mentioned, belong to a team of RTs with Safe and Caring Schools, but we were all just informed that all of the RTs are being wiped out. And we just started this role in October. And I'm hoping for poetic justice because the reality is, like, I'm just gonna, and I don't say this to, toot our horn or anything, but we were a team of 5 and we accomplished what teams of 30, like in 3 months, what teams of 30 haven't been able to accomplish.
Shout out
several
yourself.
years.
Please don't minimize that contribution. Absolutely. Shout yourselves out,
and
please.
it's just sad and frustrating because part of my mindset in this role is I'm going to go into these schools and I am going to infuse hip hop into every single corner and space of these schools everywhere I possibly can, through community, through creativity, through ingenuity, through resourcefulness, like we were talking about at the beginning, through cultivating student genius and student leadership and student voice and representation. And so my whole goal was, take over the world. That's what get in there, bring in as many artists as I can, bring in as much CRRP as I can, bring in as much community, community circles and conversations and community building and all of that. And then it was just all kind of kibosh. So it's heartbreaking because this is the work that we want to continue to do, but it is very, very tiring work. It's necessary work, but it's exhausting work. So part of my plan now is to just kind of flip the script and be like, okay, y'all gonna get rid of us? We're gonna blow this place up before we go. And so we're having a conference next week that is going to be student-led. It's gonna be the Fusion Conference. Shout out my Safe and Caring Schools team if you guys are here. And it's all about fostering unity, inclusion, safety, and oneness. And the concept behind the whole thing is hip-hop. And, just allowing students to bring who they are, to train, to action plan, and then to bring those ideas back to their schools so that they can create the changes that are so necessary in education right now. And it's heartbreaking because it's so needed, it's so necessary. Yeah. And as we all know, a lot of times in education, we talk the talk, but we don't always walk the walk, and the dollars don't follow the ideas. Yeah. So, yeah, that's why it's very emotional for us right now.
I feel you. Thank you, though, for sharing.
Thank you for holding space for me to share that. I appreciate that.
Can I go? We can put a timer on because I'm a talker. Reimagining education. I remember with another care, I can't remember the first part of the line. I just remember the KRS thing because, he's just thinking about the future and, kids are working, studying fast because they want to get at least a B in their hip-hop class. And I'm just like, why don't we have a hip-hop class? So I've been working through that, and I remember the school where I'm at now seeks progressive education, which is kind of cool. But my first year, I went and sat down with the principal. He knows what I'm going to talk about. I want to talk about integrating hip-hop into the curriculum. But it's about this course, and he's like, if I was still teaching, I would do a popular music course, like an Alan Cross style for students. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to build this course, grade 11 hip-hop course. Then you're going to go down the hall and meet with the head of English, and you're going to consult with them on how to integrate hip-hop into grade 9 and 10 curriculum. And after that, because we're new schools, we don't have grade 12s yet. When we have grade 12s, we're going to talk about experiential learning with some kind of mini schism where they can do an English and a something, and he's like, you can go to this studio down here in Burlington and this studio over here. And he's like, it's really about space, but it's vision. And for me, it's really just been about the space to dream. And sometimes that requires a sick day or two to rebalance my mind. What I've come to is, I'll always want to work with balance, but I'm about to start teaching grade 11 university English, and that's an Indigenous that's an Indigenous Perspectives course. You better believe I'm going to bring in Indigenous musicians and that artistry. And, Music Counts, the education branch of the Junos, they have done a whole free resource series interviewing 3 Indigenous musicians about their art and connected to various practice that's available, right? Then they tapped my man Darren Hamilton on the shoulder and said, let's do one for hip hop and social justice. Darren tapped me, and now we've got hashtag Black Music Matters, 9 resources on Canadian hip hop songs that speak on social justice. But Music Counts has always been music educator focused. And what I'm learning now through where I'm at in my school and this work with Music Counts is that it has to be multidisciplinary. And that's one of the things I'd like to see reimagined. So when we made these lessons, there was a this much for music teachers and this much for everybody else. Here's how you can integrate this song into history. Here's how you can do it into geography, business, fashion, the arts. We made all of the assignments and activities to integrate that one song across the board, right? And my students in the Black students affinity spaces have been like, okay, great, so we have this grade 11 Indigenous thing. What about Black history? How do we have that conversation? It's been a hell of a conversation. So we built this year grade 10 music and justice unit where we examined Canadian activists, that Canadian musical activists, and then specifically a project on female and female identifying activists. And then we connected that to specific instances in history that they could bring over to their history class as part of something that they could submit for their history class. It has to be interdisciplinary. And the way that hip hop speaks to a culture, I think that's one of the things that we need to consider for school. I want to see some of these specialized units. The fact that we teach civics in grade 10 and they can't vote, man, I would love to see grade 12 English, a political unit in grade 12 English where you could meet your representatives. And they have to care now, right? Because you're about to vote. And they have the strongest questions for those MPs.
You just need to come to my social justice class.
Let's go.
So students watching online, if you want to know why we're going to do this, that we're going to do on Monday, it's because John made me do it.
God, seriously, that's a whole reimagining. We just need the space and the energy. The pushback is so hard, but this is why it's Dangerous Minds, y'all. This is why. Because we have this culture that has encouraged us to examine, to think, to be critical, to know when to join and know when to stand apart. And that's what the culture is. And so it informs us. And it's not just about the infusion of hip hop for our sake or ego. It's what we think that this is the solution, a major solution to what is plaguing us in schools.
Wow. All right. So now it's your turn. If you have been good students of this lecture and class, we ask that if you have a question to ask of any of our panelists, online questions as well, could you please step to the mic? If there's a microphone, somebody's going to hook us up over there.
Hello, my name is Craig Connolly. I'm also a media arts educator in the city, and I've been working in the post-pandemic context, so thank you for what you do, first and foremost. My question is, as hip-hop educators, what's the one thing each of you need the most to do your job right now?
Need the most?
Yeah.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for what you do too. Time.
Yeah.
Time and like-minded people to build with, because you can't do it alone. We were kind of siloed. We were all doing these type of things separately in our own classrooms, and then we came together through this one song, 2019, each one teach one, and then we, one finger is not as strong as a fist, so we come together unified, and we can help each other out. So time and like-minded people to build with.
Yeah, community and connection, absolutely. Because that's, for me, what feeds my energy and my spirit. And for the longest time, I was in a place where I didn't have any kind of community support in education. I didn't have like-minded educators around me. I was kind of seen as a bit of an outlier. As soon as I found that, then my spirit came alive again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Conversation for me.
Okay.
Do I have to jump in? Okay, because
You
I'm a
don't have to.
stay-at-home parent right now, so
As
so
a
it's
parent,
a
what's the one
little
thing you
different for
need?
me. Nothing. My boy is awesome. I'm good.
But you have the time though, right? That's what makes our group chat
The
good,
thing-
because you can
the thing
find in
is-
ideas.
I had 2 previous kids, and I didn't have the opportunity to do this. And my wife and I talked about one of us staying home, and it was something that we were both on board with. And I think everybody should be able to do this. Like, I think we need to get back to the time when you can have a one-parent income. My wife makes a lot of money, or we wouldn't be able to do this probably. So I love the fact that I can do it, and that my little guy's awesome. And I think as parents, we should try to honor that time and cherish it. And if we can do it,
When we can, yeah.
everybody quit. If you got a kid, quit your job, stay home. It's
And
awesome.
I think selfishly, like that's a huge blessing for us because Chase drives a lot
Yep.
of our
Yep.
Big
ideas.
up
He
Chase.
generates a lot of our, like the website and the blog and socials. And him and Adrian really had that up quite a bit. And
They
you
have the
know,
most time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And,
Not
and
really.
Wise.
You would be surprised.
Well, I got 5 kids, so you're good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we appreciate your mind, man.
I
For real.
don't have
Yeah.
another question, but I have a gift. Because you're superstars, this is a card set from the 80s. It's the Superstars card set. And I want you to pick the one card that you want, okay? Out of
that's
this.
deep. Thank you.
Out of this.
Cool.
And the host can pick a card too.
I
Crazy.
love gifts.
I have a
Thank
question for you. What would be your answer for that question? What do you need
Ooh,
for the job
what
you're
a-
doing, the valuable work you're doing?
Valued.
Yeah.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge.
Well, so whoever is this man's employer and his team, value what he's doing.
Yeah, I teach cine poetry, so with cell phones, so it's all cell phone based, and we mix spoken word with cinematography. And working in the school system, I make less than the janitor.
Big up janitors. We need them.
Most
But
I know we need
We
janitors,
can't have a school
but
without one, but
I know,
yes,
but
we should
just
pay
in terms
them
of the
well.
and storytelling is like
Yeah.
the glue, it's the most important thing, right? So as teachers who are in there working in that context, the risk in a post-pandemic context right now is great. But does your pay equal the risk working in that context, right? And we need to be valued for what we're doing.
here, here.
Yeah.
True. Thank you for that.
For what it's worth, we value you, and hopefully you get resources. Welcome.
Any other questions
Yeah,
for
we
our
actually have one
panelists?
from our live stream.
Okay.
One of our listeners is asking, can you share a few strategies to slowly move English teachers with very traditional pedagogy move forward with this? It seems that in the school I teach, there is a huge gap between student voice and curriculum.
We have resources. So we actually write and develop resources as well. So that's one thing that teachers can do is find some of those and use them in the classroom. But also don't be afraid, I think. If you're a teacher and you're like, oh, I don't understand rap, I don't get it. Do a little bit of research and see what you can find out about it. Try to listen to what your kids listen to, and you probably won't like it. So like we said about curation, show them something that's a little bit better. It's interesting because I'm an old school cat. I listened to rap a long time ago, and I would show them some really early stuff, like early Run DMC from 1983. And to them, it might be a little bit corny, but at the same time, that kind of rhyming where it's like right on the beat and Run DMC, there was the two guys, they'd kind of go back and forth and alternate lines. That is a cool way to do some spoken word kind of stuff in your classroom. And I've actually used Run DMC songs like in a choir format, and I've split half the room. Okay, you guys are Run, you guys are DMC, and we've done kind of a hip-hop choir. So there's all sorts of things you can do to bring it into your classroom. The only thing we can do is encourage teachers to do it. And we're creating resources, like I said. You can find some of those fairly easily. And there's lots of other stuff out like that as well. So hopefully just try it. If you're scared to try it, hit us
ahead,
up
Ellen.
and we can help a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump on this one too, just because this is some of the work that I've been having to do is transforming practice and building teacher capacity. And it's not easy to do. It really is a lot of times like pushing a boulder up a hill. And it has to come from a place of willingness. But what I will say is that when we approach things with intellectual humility and we allow our students to become our teachers, transformative magic can happen. So imagine you go into the classroom. It's true. You go into the classroom, you say to the kids, listen, I don't know anything about hip hop. I need you guys to teach me. We're going to do an inquiry-based project, and you guys are all going to teach me about these different elements of hip hop. Because I don't know anything, and I want to be able to bring it to you, but I don't want to bring it from an inauthentic place, so let's learn together, right? And you have your students, you know, complete inquiry, research, you have them bring what they know to the table, and then at the same time, you're doing your own research and you're challenging them and saying, okay, I see the value in what you're bringing forward, well, what about this? And then you challenge them even further to think critically about the messaging and the kinds of music that they're listening to, about like, you know, commodification, all of those kinds of things, women in media, all of those conversations can start to come up. And I will say this as well, just one last thing, that when we allow ourselves to be humble as educators and allow our students to teach us and simply embrace that, which is hard for us as teachers because, you know, for the longest time, we're supposed to be the knowledge keepers. But when we do that, we see great things happen. One of the schools that I'm working in, shout out to this teacher, I won't say him by name, but when I first got to the school, I was told that, you know, this particular teacher is going to be very resistant to doing any kind of community circle, community building type of work. And I said, okay, I like a challenge. So when I emailed him, he hadn't emailed me back for like, I think it was like 15 days or something like that. And then finally, when I got in there to have a conversation with him, he had like a giant wall of desks built around his desk. And I automatically knew that this was something that, you know, like we need to literally break down this barrier. Over time, you know, I had worked with his students when he wasn't there. I had, you know, talked to him about it. We had conversations about trusting the process and not putting so much responsibility on himself as a person, but instead engaging in the process. I now have, 2 months later, his students come to me in the hallway whenever I visit that school and say, Miss, thank you. Whatever you did, he's doing the work now, and we love our class.
That's dope.
They went from hating one another, fights every day, kids being referred to the office, like, you know, kids just so upset, to now they have a community. So it is possible, even though he told me this is totally outside my wheelhouse, outside my comfort zone, and that's what happens. Yeah. So, yeah.
So if there's, in your departments, if there are challenges, whoever is asking the question, like, Black Music Matters has an introductory, like a big introductory document about the history and some application. Our stuff is from the album Head of the Class, so it's Hip Hop Educators with an H and a Z. Head of the Class, that's where the resources are, a lot of elementary resources there. The gap between student voice and practice, unfortunately, our schools run on data, so start collecting some data from students about anything really, but just finding places to give them voice, and then pick a colleague, maybe even a resistant colleague. You're going to have to create the materials, invite them into an experiment where we are going to try this lesson. Let's do it together and collect some data and see if we can. And if you can add it to that research under the pretense of research, I'm doing more stuff on student voice. I want to get this done, but I need to be able to work with a partner on this. Would you be willing to join me for this assignment, this unit, or whatever? You know, a lot of teachers like stuff planted in front of them, which is great, something I can work actionably. Even better when you can do it with a partner or with a group of people. So inviting into the process.
Wow, just like a 75-minute class, you never know how quickly the time actually goes. It feels at first, you remember when we were doing the 4 hours, people were like, oh Lord, what am I gonna do for 4 hours? And then,
don't bring up the
and
trauma.
And then you're like, wow, I can actually teach and be in with my kids. So time, openness to being a student of your profession in the now of it. A community of other educators who are thinking and wanting to work in the way we need for right now, and give space for the actual voice to be heard. So when you say student voice, we often don't give the space for the students to have it and really trust that what they do with that is going to be in the integrity of the opportunity. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be inspired in my own heavy, heavy load of what is going on in our schools for me as well. And this is refreshing and absolutely inspiring and energy driving. So thank you for joining us here on this Saturday. And thank you very specifically to Rose Ingrid Benjamin for giving me the invitation to have this conversation with these amazing educators. And thank you so much to our audience online and in person. Please stay around and greet and meet.
Mix and mingle.
I'm going to spin some tunes for you. Please feel free to come up and talk to any of us. We do have some CDs and documents over there. You can kind of look at some of the stuff we do, and let's just kick it.
And NAC, this is a vibe. Continue.
Yes, thank you to the NAC.
Please continue to support hip hop.
If we have time, you want to say what card you took?
Oh yeah, Living Color. I got Living Color. We're black. We play rock and roll. Now maybe everyone will give that a rest. Let's go.
Tina Turner, because to me she's a living icon and she is a huge advocate and example for women survivors of violence. So I love her. Shout out Tina.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
LL Cool J.
Yes. I saw him in August.
De La Soul, rest in peace, Trugoy the Dove.
Rest in peace, Trugoy. Yes.
Eric B. and Rakim.
There it is.
Rhythm and poetry right there.
No joke.
Thank you.